The Denver Broncos may have just added the final missing piece of their offensive puzzle in 2025. Free agent running back J.K. Dobbins has officially signed a one-year deal, and we're breaking down that move, what it means for the rest of the running backs on today's emergency episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
J.K. Dobbins is officially in the fold for the Denver Broncos in 2025, signing a one-year deal worth $5.25 million, or up to $5.5 million. And Broncos Country, there's a lot to talk about with this move when it comes to just generally the running back room as a whole. Who is J.K. Dobbins going to be taking carries from? Who could potentially lose their job because of this addition? What does the financial aspect of this all mean? Because $5.25 million is no small chunk of change. We're going to break it all down as we anticipate the arrival of potentially the next starting running back in Denver. But Broncos Country, thanks so much for making us part of your day, however you choose to do so. Here at Locked On Broncos, we want to be your go-to source for all things Denver Broncos, and we want to have you covered. And no matter what happens, right? J.K. Dobbins signs a deal. We want to jump on and chat about it with every single one of you. For all you everyday listeners of the show, we appreciate you. If you haven't done so already, go ahead, hit subscribe right now, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And look, the J.K. Dobbins move is significant for the Denver Broncos. We got a chance to kind of talk about it a little bit last week because the Broncos brought in J.K. Dobbins for a visit, and this was no small ordeal, right? They actually flew him in for a visit that spanned multiple days. They took him out to eat, and they brought him to the team facility the next day. Ultimately, Dobbins left initially without a contract, but there was always this idea that, hey, there's mutual interest. Kind of felt like it was a good fit between the two parties. You can't help but wonder how much Nick Chubb signing with the Houston Texans maybe played a role in just the urgency of getting this deal done. But the Broncos, again, according to multiple reports, they have signed Dobbins to a one-year contract that is worth up to $5.25 million. And that is a significant amount because it ties the highest average annual value of any deal signed for a free agent running back in 2025. And ironically, the other player that signed the high contract is Najee Harris, who signed on with the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Broncos not exactly in competition with the Los Angeles Chargers in terms of, hey, we want to see who can sign the highest price running back, but definitely ended up competing. Najee, of course, got $5.25 million in fully guaranteed money. That is not the case for J.K. Dobbins. We're kind of waiting to find out what the guaranteed money looks like there. It looks like $2.5 million in potentially reachable incentives, which is a smart deal on the Broncos' behalf because we know J.K. Dobbins has missed a lot of time due to injury in recent years. But what has he done when he's been on the field? Well, last year for the Los Angeles Chargers, Dobbins was second in the NFL in NFL Comeback Player of the Year voting, had a tremendous season for them, played 13 games in the regular season, ended up with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, over 900 yards rushing, 9 rushing touchdowns last year for the Chargers. So was really productive, but more so than just running for a certain number of yards. I think what J.K. Dobbins brought to the table in terms of yards after contact and broken tackles is what really interests me. I was always on board the don't sign a veteran running back train. Draft 2 guys if you really want to add to this position. But after drafting RJ Harvey in the later portion of the second round, the Broncos obviously felt like they needed a little bit more experience in that running back group. And it just so happens that, yes, he does come with the injury risk attached. And what free agent acquisition for the Broncos this year hasn't come with that? But J.K. Dobbins last year finished 7th in the NFL in yards after contact per rushing attempt. And that wouldn't be as significant if it wasn't for the fact that he was still up there amongst the leaders in carries who were, ranking high in that statistical category. He also ranked 4th in the NFL with 24 total broken tackles. Now, that might be an even more impressive stat because he didn't receive as many carries as somebody like Derrick Henry, who's obviously breaking a lot of tackles there for the Baltimore Ravens. J.K. Dobbins was able to do that on an impressive, number of carries in terms of, hey, he's breaking a lot of tackles every time he goes out there, essentially. So Dobbins, he showed, especially early last season, that he can be effective, whether it's hey, we need you to give us 20 carries in this game, we need you to give us 10 carries. He can do it all, and he flashed that athletic prowess that he had coming out of Ohio State once upon a time, that I think a lot of folks felt, man, this guy's going to be a really good pro, a second-round pick for the Baltimore Ravens. And unfortunately, just injuries derailed what was otherwise a very promising start to his career. But still only 26 years old now, Dobbins has a chance to continue to resurrect his NFL career in the AFC West. And he's got a chance to kind of get back at the Chargers a couple of times, right? And you really love that from the Broncos' perspective. Of course, you've got a guy that's playing on a one-year deal. He's going to want to go prove himself, but get out there on the field against the LA Chargers, he's going to have an extra little bit of a chip on his shoulder, right? So you bring in a guy that's still relatively young and gives you that upside. I think that Javonte Williams didn't give you, right? The Broncos over the last 2 years, they kind of tried to make things work with Javonte Williams. They made him their featured runner. He was the guy who led the team in touches the last couple of seasons. Unfortunately, just didn't return to that pre-ACL form that we saw from him back as a rookie, when he was the one dragging tacklers, breaking tackles all over the place, showing 3-down ability. J.K. Dobbins has the ability to do that, as well as bring to the table something the Denver Broncos didn't really have on the roster, right? Pass protection. That is something that Javonte Williams was quite good at, and a role that he, vacated, that the Broncos don't necessarily have anybody proven in that regard. I know Sean Payton recently said that Tyler Badie is good at that, but Tyler Badie is not a lock for the roster. And so you get a player like J.K. Dobbins who's going to come in. He's going to be a lock for the roster, assuming that he's healthy. And right now he's healthy. So we're expecting that to be the case. J.K. Dobbins brings to you a 3-down back who can do everything. And the Broncos are going to be able to bring along RJ Harvey at the pace that they want to. And certainly you figure that's going to be the two-headed monster for this team at the running back position. And we're going to talk about the implications for other players here in a little bit. But J.K. Dobbins, a pretty darn good free agent to be available this late in the offseason. Again, early in the offseason, before the draft, felt like it was kind of ill-advised to sort of kill that need with fire in a weaker free agency class, right? This last year's free agent class was bonkers, otherworldly stuff with, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, those guys all going in the same free agent class. This year didn't have that. Again, the highest paid guy on an average annual value scale before J.K. Dobbins signed in Denver was Najee Harris at $5.25 million. So now you bring in Dobbins into the fold, you give him a fair contract with achievable incentives, and we'll find out eventually what those incentives are. But certainly this guy is going to be a factor in your rotation at that price point, right? You're not signing him to the tied for the highest average annual value among NFL free agent running backs this year just to come in and ride the pine. He is going to play a significant role, and he brings some good skills to the table. He's still got the burst. He clocked close to 20 miles per hour on the in-game GPS last year, so he's still got the ability to burn you a little bit with some speed, but it's really going to be the yardage after contact and broken tackles playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. In fact, the Broncos, they dominated last year in terms of run block win rate and pass block win rate. Sean Payton and George Payton, they've already said the offensive line was one of our 2 highest graded position groups on the entire team last year. You need running backs that can come in and feast on that. So what have the Broncos done? They go out and get a guy that was top 5 last year in broken tackles, and you draft the guy who general manager George Payton said in RJ Harvey has maybe the best vision of any back in the rookie class, in a deep class of running backs at that. So Broncos country, it's an exciting move for the team. Certainly at this point in the offseason, you love that competition is going to bring out the best in guys, but unfortunately there are also casualties of competition, right? What is going to happen with Jaleel McLaughlin? What is going to happen with Audric Estime, Blake Watson, Tyler Badie? We're going to break down the impact on the current players on the roster on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go, right? Between dining out, online shopping, which I know I'm guilty of all the time, right? And entertainment, it's easy to lose track of where your finances are going. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, right? It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, all your investments, and all your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start actually building some wealth. And when I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much I was spending, how much I'm doing with online shopping. You think you're taking advantage of deals, but you don't realize if you take advantage of too many deals, you're spending way too much money. My favorite aspect, though, is the all-in-one convenience. You don't have to use a bunch of different apps to kind of track and see, where am I spending my money on streaming this month, coffee, eating out, all those sorts of things. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. The Denver Broncos have added J.K. Dobbins to the fray at running back. So what does that mean for guys like Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and others? Well, it might not be good news, especially for somebody like Audric Estime. And I want to start by talking about him because it feels like maybe things have been trending towards him kind of still being in the doghouse. We know how things ended late last season, right? Where he was benched for the playoff game. And you figure that doesn't really mean anything going into year two. A young player like that, he's going to get the slate wiped clean. And certainly a talented guy like that. The Broncos said they had a third round grade on this guy who was, over 900 yards after contact at Notre Dame, only 20 years old coming into the NFL, one of the youngest players in the league last season, the youngest player on the Denver Broncos roster. You figure that guy's going to get to kind of reshuffle the deck and try again this offseason. But the Broncos are not going to hand Audric Estime anything, obviously, because now they're bringing in J.K. Dobbins at a price point that says, hey, this guy is going to play. Like, J.K. Dobbins is probably going to be the guy running out of the tunnel for you in week one. If he's healthy, if everybody's healthy and all things are equal, J.K. Dobbins is probably the guy that's running out of the tunnel right before Bo Nix or right before Cortland Sutton, right? He's going to be the starting running back. Does that mean that he's going to lead the team in carries this season? Not necessarily. Does it mean that he's going to lead the team in touches? Not necessarily. Does it mean that Audric Estime is not going to play at all? Not necessarily. But what it does mean is that the assumption that Audric Estime after the NFL draft, that he was going to be, all right, he's in contention for that starting running back job. He's going to be the sort of the thunder to RJ Harvey's lightning, right? That's no longer an assumption that we can make, because you bring in a guy like Dobbins, he is going to get a significant chunk of the carries in the backfield, which, if you're a fantasy football player out there, you might be lamenting a little bit the idea that, well, RJ he's not going to get the most of the target share in Denver now. And maybe that is going to be the case. But for somebody like Audric Estime, and for people who care more about the Broncos team building and player development, this is a clear indicator that Estime needs to have a big training camp. Sean Payton said, and he wasn't going to comment too much about the J.K. Dobbins deal on Tuesday when the deal was announced by all the NFL reporters out there. But what Sean Payton did say is that you shouldn't be making any determinations about the roster right now. Like, you can predict all you want what the 53 is going to look like. You can predict all you want what the depth chart is going to look like, but we just don't know. We do know that money talks, and we do know that J.K. Dobbins, again, and I'll reiterate this because it's an important fact to note, highest average annual value, tied for the highest at running back this offseason. The Broncos paid a decent value to get him in the building. Obviously, they recruited him to come in, so we can safely assume that maybe some promises were made or that they pitched him on a specific role with this team. And of course, he's signing a one-year deal in Denver in hopes of cashing in next offseason. So he's not going to sign for a one-year deal in Denver to say, hey, why don't you come in and compete for us? Why don't you come in and just kind of be out there at training camp? This isn't a camp body kind of move. So Audric Estime, He's now going to have to beat out Jaleel McLaughlin, who is a Sean Payton guy. He's going to have to beat out Blake Watson, who was a priority undrafted guy last season. And he's going to have to beat out Tyler Badie, who he was benched for in that Buffalo game. Remember, Tyler Badie was hurt almost all of last year. He got that scary injury in the New York Jets game, and then fortunately was able to come back late in the season. And the Broncos said, you know what, Estime, he's out for that Buffalo playoff game. And Badie, he's in. Didn't really make much of a difference in that game, did it? But at the same time, you kind of do read into that a little bit, and it's hard not to. At the same time, the team wants Audric Estime to have success. Sean Payton just said a couple of weeks ago that Estime is one of those types of guys that needs a larger amount of carries to really get going and to really be the best version of himself that he can be. And Sean said, we're going to give him those opportunities. What does that mean? Maybe in the preseason, maybe in training camp. I don't know what the rotation has been like out at minicamp at the running back spot, but it does kind of seem like things are trending more towards RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin being the two guys that have been favored when Bo Nix is on the field, not Audric Estime. Now, we won't know until training camp and preseason and even after that what the Broncos' plans are for Audric Estime. Will he make this team, though? I think that's a fair question at this point now that you've added Dobbins to the mix, because you're going to have Dobbins and you're going to have Harvey on the team. How many backs are you keeping? Does Michael Burton make the team as a fullback again, or do you try to mess around with him on the practice squad? There's so many other questions like the follow-up to this. But I do think that, we need to acknowledge the fact that J.K. Dobbins coming in, this kind of completes the ultimate offseason for the Denver Broncos, doesn't it? Right? I mean, they brought in Evan Ingram to fill the void at tight end. They brought in Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw to fill those holes in the middle of the defense that kind of crippled the team late last season. You brought back some key guys like Jarrett Stidham, an underrated guy to bring back as your backup quarterback. Great for that room. Great for Bo Nix to have him. And you bring back a lot of your coaching staff. You retain 86% of your roster from last season, a roster that helped you win 10 games and get back to the postseason. You've brought back a lot of guys. You brought in, I think, the right guys, maybe the best that you could possibly bring in free agency, especially at tight end and safety. I mean, that's the Broncos. They've gone out and they've been aggressive and they've taken some calculated risks on certainly some injury prone guys in the past. But you bring those guys in, you can't help but think the training staff, they kept guys on the field at a better rate than any other team over the last 2 years. They've been able to prevent or limit or at least kind of mitigate those short-term injuries, right? And sort of put the clamp on how long guys are out, how much time they're missing, if they are to miss time at all. The Broncos have done a really good job with that, and they've done a really good job in the pro scouting department. Look at last year's free agency class and just how measured they've been. They haven't been over aggressive, right? They've been kind of just the right amount. This is a move right here to bring in J.K. Dobbins. Now, after the draft, after you've seen these guys on the field a couple of times, it kind of completes that ultimate offseason. Maybe there's another move or two to be made. We don't know. But if the Broncos didn't do anything else from this point on to the start of the regular season, you've got to think they did a really good job of not only bringing guys back, but adding to this roster through free agency, through the draft. They've been aggressive. It's been exciting to see. They've really upgraded areas of clear weakness from last year. So I'm excited about this move. I love the addition of RJ Harvey and what he brings to the table. But I think when you talk about pass protection, you talk about playing on third down, you want somebody with a little bit of experience, right? And you didn't draft 2 running backs. So the veteran option was back on the table at that point. J.K. Dobbins, he's kind of exactly what the Broncos need. Somebody who can break tackles, somebody who can grind out tough yards, somebody who hit pay dirt quite a few times last year and still had a number of explosive runs. He's not just out there plodding around and getting, 3 yards to carry. He had a really good season in 2024. So can he build off of that? That's going to be exciting to find out. How does the Broncos rotation at running back shake out? That's also going to be exciting to watch. You're going to have more updates as Cody and I continue to break down minicamp for the Denver Broncos on this week's episodes of Locked On Broncos. What is Sean Payton thinking of the guys that he's seeing out there? How are the young guys looking? It's going to be exciting, Broncos country, and we appreciate you so much for tuning in today and every day. Again, if you're not already an everyday listener, we appreciate you taking a couple of seconds, hitting subscribe, because you know your boys, Cody and Sayre, will have you covered every single day here, Locked On Broncos. But Broncos country, we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.